But first, is Boris Johnson going to throw out the baby and the bathwater to save his premiership? The Times reports today that Boris Johnson has told Tory MPs that he has received bad advice and warned that deposing him could result in a general election, as Sue Gray's report on lockdown-breaking parties looms. The Prime Minister apologised for the party that happened in the Downing Street garden in May 2020. He says he believed it to be a work event. To unpack the Prime Minister's historic relationship with the truth and what's driving the way he's handling so-called Partygate, I'm joined by the woman who's delved deep into his psyche, Sonia Purnell, journalist and author of Just Boris, A Tale of Blonde Ambition. Sonia, how deep can you go with Boris? Is what you see what you get, or does he have hidden depths?
Actually, I don't think what you see is what you get. I've known him a very long time. I've known him since the early 90s when I was his deputy. We were both reporters for the Daily Telegraph in Brussels. It was just an office of two. And, you get to know someone pretty well in those circumstances. We were working long hours under quite a lot of stress. And I've written a book about him and many articles and talked a great deal about him ever since. And what I've discovered, really talking to all sorts of other people as well, is that the kind of the bonhomie, the kind of freewheeling, irreverent, kind of jolly Boris that has become brand Boris, if you like, really is not the real Boris Johnson. In fact, when you get closer to him, it tends to be that the less you like him, that he's great from a distance, but when you get up close and find out what he's really like, it's not so great. And I think also, I think that's such a weird question that you started with at the beginning. Do we expect or do we want our politicians to tell us the truth? Well, let me just sort of put it this way. Do we want someone who is now a proven liar? I mean, he's been caught telling lies so often throughout his entire career, by the way, not just since he's been Prime Minister, but do we want someone who in that very, very powerful position, remember, someone who can put us in prison? I mean, he can change laws and look us up, deprive us of our liberty. He can take money away from us in terms of taxes. He can send troops out to Ukraine or wherever else who may well die. Surely we want someone who is responsible for all of those things that we can trust, that we know has integrity and has competence. And I'm afraid Boris Johnson pretty much shows us that he's in very short supply of both.
So historically, what would you define as the most sort of egregious transgressions when it comes to truth-telling from Boris Johnson?
Well, it's a strange thing where it's almost that he finds it difficult to tell the difference, where the line is between truth and, true things and false things. So it's almost that anything he says is what pops into his head at the time as being convenient for that moment. I mean, you see that quite a lot at PMQs. He was very rattled, Prime Minister's questions. He was very rattled this week. He was jabbing his finger. He was doing that kind of narrow-eyed, sort of darting-eyed look. You know that he's rattled at that point. And he just comes up with a whole lot of things that really aren't true. On previous occasions, he said that we're going to build 40 hospitals, or this time he said we have the fastest growing economy in the G7. Actually, if you look at the last quarter, we're fifth in the G7. So I think, it's just something that comes into his head and he'll just spout anything. He doesn't have those kind of breaks that most of us have. Oh, I really shouldn't say that because it's not true. And I really shouldn't say it because millions of people are watching this and they're relying on my word.
In your experience, would you apply the word amoral to him?
Amoral? Yes, I would. And, I hesitate only because it's a very big word to say about anyone. But my experience of him all these years suggests that, yes, he is.
And the fact of the matter is, though, the reason he's still in Downing Street, the reason he's still Prime Minister, is that people really like him. People are reluctant to let him go. People actually see him as the right figurehead for the nation. Do you understand why there are these sort of, real polarities when it comes to how Boris Johnson's regarded?
Yes, I do, up to a point. I think, again, if you're looking at politics in quite a distant way and you just think, oh, there's that fun guy, he's got a great way with words, he's not one of those really boring, stiff people in suits and things.
My kids love him.
Well, actually, I think that's changing. I think they did. But, I have kids myself and, they're sort of young
I think they will
adults
have been
now.
influenced by your experiences,
Well,
perhaps.
not my kids. I'm thinking more about their friends. But yeah, I
But
mean,
he did
I
win
think
a
it's changing.
majority of 80 in December 2019. The Tories got the highest share of the votes in stature in 1979. I mean, he has got, star appeal. I mean, I suppose it's no coincidence that you've used the word celebrity in your title.
He does have star appeal, absolutely. He has a great presence. He has great charisma. When he's on the screen, it's really hard not to watch him. But those are all qualities that one might hope to see in a chat show host or someone like that. They're not necessarily what we want in a prime minister when we're a country in crisis with COVID and Brexit and all the other things, war in Ukraine. Surely being amusing on TV isn't quite what we're looking for.
You were a colleague of his in Brussels. I think that's when you first encountered him. Um, and you said at the time, and when you met him, you said, I think it was as his star was rising, and you've said that he's the most ambitious person you've ever met. Is ambition his defining characteristic? And in terms of how he's behaving now, what do you think he's thinking?
I mean, I said ambition and ruthlessness. Actually, I'd put them both there. I think the sort of the competitive instinct is hugely developed with Boris Johnson, and he always wanted to become prime minister because that's the number one person in the UK, isn't it? It wasn't so much about being prime minister; it was about winning. And I think there again we might have sort of identified the problem is that he didn't really have this great vision apart from getting Brexit done, to coin a phrase, but that was kind of very unclear as to how it was going to be done. It was really just about seizing power, and he's done very little with it since, apart from leaving the European Union. But we still can't see how that's going to look in 5 to 10 years time. We still have lorries queuing for hours or days on end to get through Dover. None of these things have been worked out. So I really do sincerely believe it was all about winning rather than the doing afterwards.
How much do you think he was moulded by his experience at Eton in terms of the sort of ebullience and the confidence and the sense that if you just keep talking, things will work out right in the end?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I mean, he arrived at Eton as Alexander, quite a shy teenager, actually. And I think he knew that he was going to have to kind of, come up with an act that was going to help him survive. So he became Boris, which is his second name. It's not his first name. Far more kind of, ebullient, like you say, flamboyant, perhaps is the word to use. And he created the persona that you see now when he was at Eton. And he realized then that making people laugh won him friends, won him influence. But it didn't necessarily mean that he was good at running things. But it did make him very popular, at least with some boys, not all of them.
So, in terms of what's happening at the moment, what would be your prediction of what will happen? I mean, we've seen today that Boris Johnson is on the cover of the Times. That he's saying he was given bad advice. He didn't know it was a birthday party. He did. Basically everyone else, it seems, is to blame other than the Prime
Mm.
Minister. Um, will he stick to that until he's toppled? Will he, I mean, what do you predict is going to happen? Because I think the nation is in some ways rather bored of the story. And, on the other hand, a bit like us here, on tenterhooks as to what's going to happen next.
Well, I mean, I can't claim to be able to go inside the mind of the Conservative Party, and it's in the hands at the moment of other Conservative MPs as to whether or not they push him. I mean, I'm sure he will continue to blame other people, but don't forget he did that before. I mean, the crisis before the crisis before the crisis before that, he said it was the fault of his advisors, and he cleared that lot out and brought a new lot in. And a lot of these advisors who he's now blaming weren't actually around when those parties were taking place. So it's all very convenient to blame everyone else. But as we all know, the buck stops at the top. If this was a company, people say, well, he's the guy in charge or she's the woman in charge. That's where the responsibility lies. And actually, if you were a more honourable person, you would say, look, I'm a distraction. The country's got a lot of problems. There's got a lot of things to deal with. Let's get someone who isn't causing this absolute endless turmoil and turbulence and scandal after scandal, and so that they really can get on with the business of governing. But don't hold your breath. I don't think that's going to happen.
Just finally, what was his response to your book? Was there a response?
Uh, Well, all sorts of very, very untrue and unpleasant stories were put out around me, and I was told on air by a broadcaster who I won't name that I'd had an affair with him and I'd written it because he wouldn't marry me, all of which is totally
Well,
untrue.
that would put
But
you in
because
like
they
quite a
couldn't,
large majority, wouldn't
oh
it?
yeah, well, I mean, unbelievable. And he couldn't get out the book because everything was double checked and triple checked. So it was a way of sort of undermining a woman's credibility, and there were lots of other things said about me as well. So it was a real old smear campaign. It was pretty unpleasant, and yeah. So but I got through that period, and I stand by everything I said then, and I think unfortunately, it's all turned out to be true, and I'm sad about that because I'd much rather have been proven wrong, and he turned out to be a great prime minister, but sadly that hasn't happened.
Sonia Purnell, journalist and author of Just Boris, A Tale of Blonde. It's not called A Tale of... It is called A Tale of Blonde
A Tale of
Ambition.
Blonde Ambition is the
Yes,
most
I know.
recent.
I've had three different... Has it got a different... Did it start with a different line about celebrity
Yes,
something?
The Irresistible Rise of Political Celebrity was the first edition, but we
Okay.
thought it was a bit of a tongue twister, and quite like that sort of A Tale of Blonde Ambition, which kind of sums him up. I mean, there's something about his blondness that's so kind of key to everything about him in a way.
I once featured in an article where the headline was Bland Ambition. I'd prefer if it was Blonde Ambition. But there
I
you
think
go.
I would too, yeah.
Sonia Purnell, as I said, author and of Just Boris, A Tale of Blonde Ambition. We've got the title, the newest title there.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining me. This is Mariella Frostrup on Times Radio.